So, how do you solve an impossible problem? I'm not talking about a difficult one. I mean a challenge so huge, so complex, that it could threaten the future of humanity itself. Today, we're going to dissect the mental operating system of a guy who, well, he takes on these kinds of problems for a living. We're going inside the methodology Elon Musk uses to turn planetary-scale chaos into crystal-clear, solvable engineering challenges. In 2002, fresh off selling PayPal, Elon Musk had a fortune in his hands. And he didn't buy a yacht, he bought the most audacious, impossible challenge you can imagine: saving human consciousness. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. He had the money to do literally anything. But his conclusion was pretty stark. Humanity's biggest risk is that we're stuck on one planet. And the only logical solution? We've got to colonize Mars. But when he went to the aerospace industry, he basically hit a brick wall. Everyone told him the same thing. Affordable rockets? That's impossible. It's a financial black hole. The conventional wisdom was an absolute no. And this is the moment that changes everything. Instead of accepting their answer, he asked a totally different question. He didn't ask, how much do rockets cost? He asked, what are rockets made of? He went right back to the very, very beginning. And that simple, almost childlike question, that's the spark. That's the birth of this hyper-rational, systematic way of thinking that turns the chaos of an existential threat into a clear, solvable engineering problem. We're calling it the focus engine, and it's the tool he'd go on to use to deconstruct and then completely rebuild entire industries. Okay, so let's get into it. Here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the sheer scale of the challenge he set for himself. Then we'll look at how his early life kind of forged this unique mindset. We'll break down the philosophy of the focus engine itself, see how it's put into action, look at the insane impact it's had, and finally, we'll talk about how you can apply its core lesson to your own life. All right, part 1, the impossible challenge. This is all about framing the problem. It's about how Musk took this huge philosophical question of survival and translated it into the language of physics and economics. You know, the logic was pretty brutal, but you can't really escape it. As long as we're all living on this one planet, everything, all of our art, our science, our history, is vulnerable. One single catastrophic event, whether it's a giant asteroid or something we do to ourselves, and it's all gone. So to ensure our long-term survival, becoming multiplanetary wasn't just some cool sci-fi dream. It was a necessity. And the only real option was Mars. But the experts, the gatekeepers of the industry, they all said the same thing. The cost was just too high. The problem wasn't just hard, they said it was impossible. So where does someone get the sheer conviction to challenge an entire industry's definition of impossible? For that, let's jump into part 2. This mindset wasn't cooked up in some boardroom. It was forged in isolation, decades earlier. Musk's childhood in South Africa was, by his own account, pretty lonely. He was a bookish kid who found his escape, not with friends, but inside the pages of science fiction and encyclopedias. A huge influence on him was Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. And the big lesson he took away from it was this: the most important thing you can possibly do is work on things that prolong civilization. This idea gave him a framework for his whole life, and it's why he got so frustrated with traditional education. He actually dropped out of a PhD program at Stanford after just 2 days, because he was convinced that the world's most urgent problems needed to be solved now, with real science, not just debated in some classroom. And that conviction is what led him to develop his secret weapon. Which brings us to part 3, the focus engine philosophy. This is the core operating system, the mental software he runs, to basically deconstruct reality and find a better way to build it back up. At the heart of it all is a concept from physics called first principles thinking. Now, the real power here is how different it is from how most of us think. See, most people and most companies reason by analogy. We do things a certain way because, well, that's how they've always been done. You hear it all the time. Rockets are expensive because they've always been expensive. That's a mental trap. First principles thinking is the way out. It forces you to throw out conventional wisdom and break a problem down to its most basic, undeniable truths, the things you know are true from the laws of physics. And this process is just brilliant. The focus engine really has 3 main gears. First, you deconstruct. You question every single assumption. For rockets, that meant asking, what are the raw materials, the aluminum, the titanium, the copper, what do they actually cost? And what he found was insane. The raw materials were only 2% of the final price. The other 98%, that was just inefficiency. Second, you rebuild. Once you know the fundamental costs, you build a solution from the ground up, totally unbound by how it was done before. And third, you simplify. This is a complete obsession for him. The best part is no part. Every component, every process adds cost and is a potential point of failure. So you just eliminate until only the absolute essentials are left. But look, a philosophy is useless if you don't actually put it into practice. So let's get into part 4 and see how this whole mindset is enforced through some really intense daily systems. This is where the theory becomes reality. First off, just look at where he puts his most valuable resource, his time. This chart tells you everything. Nearly 80% of his time is spent deep in the trenches on engineering and design. He's not just a CEO who manages people. He's a chief engineer who solves problems. He's living his own principles by focusing on the core technical work, the place where first principles actually get applied. And his signature technique for managing this time is the 5-minute sprint. His entire day is broken down into these super focused 5-minute blocks. Now, this isn't about doing a million things at once. It's the total opposite. It's a system for tackling one complex problem with maximum intensity for a short burst, making a decision or delegating, and then immediately moving to the next. It forces you to be incredibly clear and prevents you from getting bogged down. It's all about relentless forward momentum. And this personal intensity gets scaled across his companies through a culture that basically wages a war on waste. The rules are simple and they are absolute. If you're in a meeting and it's not productive, you're expected to just get up and leave. Communication has to be direct, not filtered up and down a chain of command. And make no mistake, these aren't just quirky office rules. They are systems designed to make sure the entire company moves at the same speed he does. So what happens when you take this philosophy and these systems and you unleash them on some of the world's most established industries? Well, you get a revolution. Let's move to part 5, rewriting industry rules. This is the payoff, the world-changing legacy of the focus engine in action. The first big transformation was his own. He went from being a successful software guy, working in the world of bits and code, to a high-stakes industrialist, wrestling with physics, manufacturing, and global supply chains. And in doing that, he completely redefined what modern industry could even aim for, shifting the goal from just making a profit to solving civilization-level problems. And this table just lays it out perfectly. In aerospace, the conventional wisdom was that rockets are disposable, and they're always going to be ridiculously expensive. The first principles result? Reusable rockets that can literally land themselves, cutting the cost to get to orbit by an almost unbelievable amount. Then, in the automotive industry, the old thinking was that electric cars were basically glorified golf carts, slow, niche, with terrible range. The result? High-performance EVs that not only became cool, but kicked the entire world's transition to sustainable energy into high gear. This all brings us to part 6, our final and honestly most important section, find your first principle. How do we take these lessons from this massive industrial scale and actually apply them to our own challenges? So I want you to take a second and really think about this. What is the most complex problem you're facing right now, in your work or in your life? The one that just feels stuck, where all the normal answers just aren't cutting it. Really get it clear in your head. Okay, now that you have that problem in mind, ask yourself this. What are the assumptions you just accept as facts? What's the "it's impossible" or the "we've always done it this way" that's blocking your path? This is that first step of deconstruction, identifying those invisible walls you've built around the problem. And this is the core message, the big takeaway. The lesson of the focus engine is that real clarity doesn't come from what everyone else thinks. It's forged from fundamental truths. So make a commitment to turn your chaos into clarity. Stop reasoning by analogy. Stop trying to solve problems based on what's been done before. Start by asking, what are the absolute, undeniable truths here? And build your solution up from there. Because in the end, the only way to solve the truly impossible problems is to have the courage to start from zero. The path to a breakthrough isn't about finding a new answer to an old question. It's about finding a new, more fundamental question to ask. And if you remember one thing, let it be this. Challenging your facts is the first step toward revolutionary clarity.